Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? By day, Meriton's books and collectibles smelled of paper dust and cinnamon-scented cleaner. The old floorboards creaked like polite applause beneath every step, and the display window, its glass warped from decades of sun, made the world outside shimmer. I'd worked here for 5 years, ringing up paperbacks for the same handful of locals. Nights were quiet, predictable. I'd lock up, walk the 2 blocks home, heat up a frozen dinner, and read until my eyelids drooped. The live stream started as a marketing experiment. Mrs. Meriton, who ran the store like a ship's captain, suggested I read rare or out-of-print books aloud on camera. People like cozy, she'd said, brushing dust off a stack of Victorian romances. I doubted anyone would watch, but on a slow Tuesday, I stacked a few encyclopedias into a makeshift phone stand, settled into the deep green armchair by the front window, and read the first chapter of The Clockmaker's Lament. 5 viewers tuned in. By the 3rd week, there were hundreds. I added warm lamplight, a teapot on the side table, and a soft instrumental playlist. The comments glowed with kindness. Your voice reminds me of my grandma. I fall asleep to this every night. You make books feel alive again. It felt safe until he arrived. The username was Chapter End. At first his comments were harmless. That line gave me chills. Your pacing is perfect. But they grew personal. You always use the chipped mug with the gold rim, don't you? Shorter hair tonight. I like it. Was that blueberry pie from the bakery across the street? My favorite. It was the kind of detail you could excuse once, maybe twice. By the 5th time, I felt a cold thread of unease pull tight. One night, halfway through a live reading, his comment popped up. Careful, your attic door is open. My pulse stuttered. The attic trapdoor was above the reading chair. I glanced up. The wood panel was flush with the ceiling, or maybe just slightly misaligned. I forced a laugh for the audience. Guess we have a ghost in the comments tonight. My voice didn't sound like my own. The first package came on a rain-slick Monday. Brown paper, no return address, my name written in neat block letters. Inside, a pressed daisy sealed between wax paper. I recognized it instantly. It had been tucked into a bookmark I'd lost in high school. 2 days later, another package. A keychain shaped like a tiny typewriter, the same one I'd dropped in a movie theater years ago. The third, on Friday, a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web with my childish handwriting on the inside cover. I donated it to a thrift shop when I was 12. The air in the shop began to feel colder, though the radiator hummed. These weren't random gifts. They were pieces of my past, gathered by someone who had been looking. Saturday night, as I read The House on Hemlock Lane, something flickered in my periphery, a pinpoint of green light tracing the wall behind me. Did you see that? A viewer typed. Just headlights outside, I lied, even though the front window was sealed behind thick curtains. The next evening, it happened again. Only this time the light slid across my shoulder before vanishing. I ended the stream early, checked every lock, and told myself it was nothing. But when I stood in the darkened shop, the silence pressed against my ears like cotton. Monday morning, Mrs. Meriton handed me the keys. She was leaving for 2 weeks to visit her sister. Keep the place cozy, she said with a smile. That night, during a chapter break, the green dot returned, hovering directly above my head. My hands went cold. I shut down the stream mid-sentence. The alley door was locked. The street was empty, but the attic door, the latch looked slightly bent. I fetched the step stool, heart pounding, and climbed up. The air was stale and damp. My flashlight beam skimmed over boxes of outdated accounting ledgers, a broken ceiling fan, and, my breath caught, A sleeping bag in the far corner. Beside it, a half-empty water bottle, granola wrappers, and a laptop. A camera tripod was angled toward a narrow slit in the attic wall, aimed directly at my reading chair below. A soft scrape of movement came from the darkness. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. A man shifted into view, crouched low, hoodie shadowing his face. "You shouldn't be here," he said evenly, as if I was the intruder. I froze. The ladder was behind him. "You read so well," he continued, a twitching smile creeping over his mouth. "I didn't want to miss a word. I've been here for weeks, listening, watching." My stomach lurched. "You sent the packages. I returned what was yours," he said, almost gently. "Friends return things." He stepped toward me. I grabbed a heavy metal bookend from a box and swung. It connected with a sickening thud. He stumbled, swore, and I bolted past, half falling down the ladder. My hands shook as I shoved the tallest bookshelf under the trapdoor and called the police. They found him still in the attic 20 minutes later. Daniel Price, 38 years old, with a record of trespassing and harassment. He'd been sneaking in via the rusted fire escape, living above me for nearly a month. The green dot? A laser pointer he used during my streams to keep me centered for his hidden camera. The packages had been scavenged from pawn shops and thrift stores in my hometown. He was arrested. The attic door was repaired. I haven't sat in that armchair since. The lamp still casts its warm glow on empty cushions, a stage for an audience that's gone. And sometimes, when the store settles at night, I think I hear the faintest murmur from above. Turn the page. Rain glazed the streets of Fairview like black glass, making the streetlights blur into orange halos. Natalie Chambers hunched inside her jacket, her hood pulled tight, hands buried in pockets. The weather wasn't what made her uneasy. It was the gnawing ache in her throat and the pounding behind her eyes. She'd fought off a cold for days, but tonight she finally gave in. The pharmacy 2 blocks away was still open. She almost didn't go. She'd been curled on the couch with her laptop, grading essays for her part-time tutoring job, but the cough had become relentless. 15 minutes, she told herself as she slid into her sneakers. Just cough syrup, tea, maybe tissues, then home. The wind cut sharp as she stepped outside. Puddles reflected broken neon from a nearby diner. Across the street, a man stood under a flickering lamppost, hands buried in his coat pockets. His face was shadowed by the hood of his parka. Natalie kept her eyes forward. Cities were full of people like that. Loiterers, smokers, people waiting for someone. Still, the sight slid like cold water down her spine. By the time she reached the pharmacy, her sneakers were damp and her hair clung to her cheeks. The store's automatic doors sighed open, spilling warm, bright air over her. She grabbed a basket and made for the cold remedies aisle, rubbing at her temples. Halfway through reading a label, movement caught her eye. The man from the lamppost walked in. He didn't head to the counter or grab a cart. Instead, he drifted along the wall toward her aisle, holding a single dented can of soda. Root beer, she thought. His eyes were hidden under the shadow of his hood, but his head tilted slightly, like he was studying her. Natalie shifted her basket to her other hand and turned down another aisle. The soles of his shoes squeaked faintly on the linoleum as he followed. In the dental care section, she paused, pretending to read toothpaste ingredients. A glance over her shoulder confirmed it. He was at the end of the aisle, still holding that same soda. Her chest tightened. Coincidence, she muttered under her breath. It's nothing. But when she went to the tea section, there he was. When she detoured through cosmetics, there he was again, always close enough that she could hear the faint clink of liquid in the can. Natalie ducked into the refrigerated drinks aisle, hoping to lose him. She crouched to check a bottom shelf, peering into the glass door's reflection. The man was standing just behind her, head cocked, the soda can dangling from his fingertips. His reflection stared at hers like he was studying an animal in a cage. Natalie's pulse slammed in her ears. She shot up and turned around. He was gone. She scanned the aisle. Empty. The soft hum of the refrigerators filled the silence. Shaken, she went straight to the front counter where a young cashier was scanning vitamins for a customer. "Excuse me," Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's a man following me. Black parka, soda can, keeps showing up in every aisle." The cashier's brows drew together. "Where is he now?" Natalie turned to point toward the drinks aisle. It was empty. He was just... She trailed off. "Could be a regular," the cashier offered, though her tone had a trace of unease. "We'll keep an eye out." Natalie bought her items, stuffed them into a tote bag, and stepped outside into the wet night. The street was quiet, the rain now a fine mist. She forced herself not to glance behind her until she was halfway down the block. When she did, she froze. The man was at the pharmacy entrance, hood still up, holding the same can of soda. Even from this distance, she thought she saw condensation dripping from it. Natalie quickened her pace. She cut down a side street, splashing through puddles. Her apartment was 2 blocks away. Just keep moving, she told herself. The rhythmic sound of footsteps followed, not hurried, not trying to hide, just steady, deliberate. Natalie's heart didn't slow until she was inside her apartment, the deadbolt thrown. The air was stale and warm from the radiator. She set the tote bag on the counter and stood for a moment, listening. Silence. She laughed shakily at herself. "Paranoid, that's all," she muttered. After putting away the groceries, she went to her bedroom to change. Passing through the living room, something caught her eye. On the coffee table sat a dented can of root beer. Condensation still slid down its sides. Natalie's breath hitched. She hadn't bought root beer. She hadn't touched any soda. She stepped closer. The can was cold against her fingertips, as if it had just been taken from a refrigerator. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Natalie backed away from the table, her throat tightening. A soft clink came from the hallway. Before she could react, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. Pain exploded in her shoulder as something slammed her into the wall. She crumpled to the floor, gasping. The man loomed above her, hood shadowing his face, the can of root beer still in one hand. He didn't speak, didn't breathe loudly, just stared down at her with an expression she couldn't read. Natalie scrambled backward, knocking over a lamp. She grabbed the heavy ceramic base and swung it. The man staggered, the can finally dropping with a dull thud. Root beer hissed and foamed across the carpet. She bolted for the door. Her fingers fumbled on the lock, the metallic scrape deafening in the quiet. The man's footsteps padded toward her. She turned the deadbolt just as his hand clamped down on her wrist. Natalie wrenched free and flung the door open, spilling into the hallway. She screamed for help, her voice cracking. From the stairwell, her neighbor, Mr. Henley, appeared with a watering can in hand. "Natalie, what's going on?" The man retreated into her apartment, then out the back door. By the time Mr. Henley reached her, the hallway was empty. The police arrived quickly. They searched the apartment, collected the soda can, and noted that the back door lock had been tampered with. "He's done this before," one officer muttered as they dusted for prints. Natalie couldn't stop shivering, even wrapped in a blanket on her couch. She kept picturing the way he'd stood in the store, still, patient, watching her like she was already his. They never caught him that night. But a week later, Natalie opened her front door to find a small package on the mat. Inside was a single dented can of root beer, condensation still clinging to the metal. The lake had a way of swallowing sound. Even the caw of crows seemed to vanish before it reached the far shore. The first morning after I moved into the cabin, I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee and heard nothing. No road noise, no rustle of neighbors, no thrum of distant machinery. Just stillness, so deep it felt like a weight pressing into my ears. It was exactly what I'd been looking for, a place to paint without distractions. I had rented the cabin for 6 months, enough time to finish the gallery series I'd been struggling to complete in the city. The listing had described it as solitary and ideal for creative minds. They weren't kidding. The nearest store was a 20-minute drive. The dirt road ended at my driveway, and there was only one other house in sight, a squat, weather-worn structure just across the narrow strip of water that split the lake in two. I first noticed him on my third day. I had been at my easel, halfway through a portrait, when a flicker of movement caught my attention. Across the water, framed perfectly by his dusty window, a man sat at a table. He wasn't doing much, just holding a pencil, head bent over a large sketch pad. At first, I thought it was a coincidence that our windows faced each other so directly, but then I realized he was angled just enough that if he looked up, he'd see me. It felt like one of those awkward moments when you catch a stranger staring for too long. I waved, just to be polite. He didn't wave back. His head stayed down, pencil moving steadily across the paper. Over the next few days, he was always there. Morning, afternoon, even in the blue tint of evening. Same seat, same table, same sketch pad. Sometimes he would glance up, but if he noticed me looking, he didn't react. It wasn't exactly threatening, but it was strange. A week later, I started to notice details. His shoulders were always slightly hunched, his face half hidden by shadows in the room behind him. His hands moved with a practiced rhythm, short, deliberate strokes. But the most unnerving part came when I realized he never once turned on a light. Even after the sun went down, he would sit there, motionless in the darkness, the dim outline of his head barely visible against the glass. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I set up my old pair of binoculars, telling myself it was just to see what he was working on. The lenses brought him into sharp focus, and I froze. He was drawing me. Not someone who vaguely looked like me, but me. My hair pulled into the same messy knot I had it in that afternoon, the loose sweater I was wearing, even the half-empty coffee mug on the windowsill beside me. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I dropped the binoculars and stepped away from the window, telling myself I was overreacting. It wasn't like he could see inside my cabin in any detail from across the lake. But over the following days, the drawings kept getting more precise. One morning, I saw myself on his sketch pad again, this time holding my phone in one hand, leaning against the porch railing, looking toward the water. The exact pose I had been in less than 10 minutes earlier. I told myself it was just coincidence, that maybe he was sketching from memory, filling in the gaps. But that theory died when I spotted a new drawing on his desk. Me at my easel, brush in hand, mid-stroke. The angle was wrong. It wasn't from across the lake. It was from inside my cabin. I started keeping the curtains closed. It felt ridiculous, like I was letting some recluse dictate how I lived in my own home. But the thought of him watching me, studying me, wasn't something I could ignore anymore. Then, 3 weeks after moving in, I woke up to find something on my nightstand that hadn't been there when I went to sleep. A charcoal portrait. Me, lying in bed, my hair splayed across the pillow, my mouth slightly open. The kind of intimate detail you could only capture by sitting in the room with the subject. My stomach flipped. The signature at the bottom read, Ellis. I called the sheriff's office. 2 deputies arrived within the hour. I explained everything. The man at the window, the drawings, the portrait in my bedroom. They exchanged looks I didn't like, but they agreed to check out his cabin. I watched from my porch as they knocked on his door. No answer. After a minute, they went inside. They were in there for a long time. When they finally emerged, one deputy came straight over to me while the other stayed behind to secure the property. You said he's been here every day? The deputy asked. Every day, morning till night. He shook his head. Place is empty. Looks like it's been that way for a while. There's no running water, no food, no electricity. But, he hesitated, you might want to prepare yourself. The inside is covered. Every wall, every surface. Drawings of you. Hundreds of them. My breath caught. What about the ones he did from inside my cabin? The deputy gave me a look I'll never forget. Pity mixed with discomfort. We didn't find any sign of forced entry. But we did find a camera, in your attic, pointed through the vent above your studio. They took the portrait from my nightstand as evidence, but the rest of the drawings stayed. I didn't want them. The deputies promised they'd be in touch if they found him. I left the curtains drawn for weeks after that. Eventually, I convinced myself it was over. Whoever, or whatever, Ellis was, he was gone. The lake went back to swallowing sound. The days blurred into one another as I worked at my easel, avoiding the window out of habit. Then one morning, I woke up to find another drawing on my nightstand. The signature was still Ellis. Only this time, the portrait wasn't of me sleeping. It was of me standing in my kitchen, holding the phone, calling the police. And in the background of the drawing, just beyond the window, was the faint, shadowy figure of a man, pencil in hand, watching. It had been snowing since morning, the kind of steady white curtain that makes the whole world feel smaller. Mark Hunter gripped the steering wheel as his old Subaru crunched up the narrow road toward Miller's Lake. In the passenger seat, his best friend Clara scrolled through her phone, the bluish glow lighting her face. "You sure this is the right place?" she asked, peering out into the blur of snow. Mark nodded toward a bend in the road. "Jordan texted me the address twice. Cabin's right up ahead. He said he's got a surprise for everyone." Clara rolled her eyes. When Jordan says surprise, it usually means something's about to be set on fire or posted to his channel. That wasn't wrong. Jordan was one of those people who treated life like a never-ending performance. He'd been chasing internet clout since they were in high school. Stupid pranks, risky dares, anything that might rack up views. Now he had a decent following on his streaming platform, enough to turn his antics into part-time income. Mark and Clara had agreed to the weekend cabin trip because they both needed a break. No classes, no work, just a few friends, hot drinks, and maybe some board games by the fire. When they pulled into the cabin's drive, they could already see warm light spilling from the windows. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the cold air. Inside, the cabin was cozy, low timber ceilings, mismatched furniture, and a big stone fireplace. A few other friends were already there, lounging on couches with steaming mugs in hand. Jordan stood in the center of the room, grinning like a man who just won the lottery. He was tall, wiry, wearing a hoodie with his own channel's logo splashed across it. "Glad you made it," he said, clapping Mark on the shoulder. "Tonight's going to be wild." "What's the surprise?" Clara asked. Jordan tapped the phone mounted on his small tripod. "We're doing the Pulsegate challenge. Brand new. Barely anyone's tried it yet." Mark frowned. "Never heard of it." Jordan's eyes gleamed. "It's simple. You stare into this strobe app for an hour straight. The flashes mess with your brain. People say it unlocks hidden stuff, hallucinations, visions, whole different layer of reality." "That sounds like a migraine waiting to happen," Clara muttered. Jordan just laughed. "Nah, it's safe. I've done shorter sessions before. Tonight I'm going full hour. Live stream. This is going to blow up." Mark didn't like the sound of it, but Jordan was already fiddling with the app. The screen began to strobe, a rapid sequence of white and black frames, almost hypnotic. By the time the camera was live, a dozen people had tuned in. Jordan sat cross-legged on the couch, phone in his lap, the pulsing light reflecting in his eyes. At first he just joked with the viewers, tossing shout-outs into the chat. "Shout out to Timmy from Ohio. Yeah, I'm gonna see some aliens for you, buddy." 10 minutes in, the joking stopped. Jordan's smile softened into something almost vacant. His gaze was locked on the phone. "You guys see that?" he murmured. Mark glanced at Clara. "See what?" Jordan tilted his head, listening to something no one else could hear. "They're moving. Right there." In the light, Clara shifted uncomfortably. "Jordan, maybe take a break." He waved her off. "Number, they want me to keep going." The chat on Jordan's stream lit up, half the viewers typing LOL, and the other half spamming worried emojis. 15 minutes later, Jordan's breathing changed. It was shallower, faster. His shoulders tensed. "They're closer now," he whispered. "They've got faces. So many faces." Mark stepped toward him. "Jordan, don't block the light," Jordan barked, his voice sharp enough to make Mark stop in his tracks. A flicker of fear slid through the room. The strobe kept pulsing. Shadows from the furniture seemed to jump in unnatural patterns, each flash freezing them into a different shape. Jordan started grinning again, but this time it was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "They want to show me where they are." 40 minutes in, Jordan's hands twitched like he was holding something invisible. Then, without warning, he dug his fingernails into the skin beneath his eyes. Clara gasped. "Jordan, stop!" He ignored her, scratching harder, leaving angry red marks. "I need to see them without the glass in the way," he muttered. Mark lunged forward, grabbing his wrists. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jordan's eyes flicked up to Mark's, and for just a second, Mark swore his pupils were wrong, elongated, almost like the shapes you see in an after-image when you stare at a bright light too long. "Let go," Jordan hissed. "You'll never find them if you don't let go." 50 minutes in, Jordan suddenly bolted upright, knocking the tripod over. The phone clattered to the floor, the strobe still pulsing. "They're calling me," he said, and before anyone could react, he was at the door, yanking it open to the snowstorm outside. Mark and Clara ran after him, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. The wind bit at their faces, but Jordan didn't seem to feel it. He was headed straight for the frozen surface of Miller's Lake. "Jordan!" Clara shouted. "Stop!" He didn't. Halfway across the ice, he turned to look at them, his expression rapturous. "It's so bright out here. You can't see it, can you? The gate's right there." Mark's stomach turned. "There's nothing there, Jordan. Come back." But Jordan dropped to his knees and pressed his palms flat against the ice. His lips moved in rapid whispers, as if he were answering someone. Then, before Mark could reach him, Jordan slammed his head against the frozen surface. The sound was sharp, sickening. Mark and Clara skidded to their knees, grabbing him under the arms. Blood smeared the ice. Jordan's breath came in shallow bursts, his eyes glassy. "They're here," he said, a faint smile curving his lips. "They're right, under us." Then the ice beneath him cracked, not wide enough to break through, but enough to make a sound like something shifting beneath it. Mark yanked him back toward the shore. By the time they reached the cabin, Jordan's body was limp. Clara called 911, her voice shaking. Mark pressed his ear to Jordan's chest, praying for a heartbeat. There was none. The paramedics arrived within 15 minutes, but it was too late. They tried everything: compressions, oxygen, injections, but Jordan was gone. The phone was still lying on the cabin floor, the strobe app still flashing. When Mark picked it up to shut it off, he froze. In the reflection of the screen, lit by the pulsing white light, there were faces, dozens of them, pressed close, mouths open, eyes unblinking, and as the light flickered one last time before the battery died, the faces smiled. The first time I saw Claire in almost a decade, it was raining. Not the sudden downpour kind, but the slow, soaking drizzle that turned streets into streaks of glass beneath dim streetlights. I was ducking under the awning of the corner coffee shop when I heard my name. "Lena?" I turned, and there she was. Same green eyes, same pale, angular face. Even her coat looked familiar, like the one she wore back in college, though I was sure that one had been thrown away years ago. We hadn't spoken since graduation. Back then, we'd been inseparable, bound together in the way only young women in their 20s can be, swapping clothes, finishing each other's sentences, knowing exactly how the other took her coffee. And then, we weren't. The details of the fight had blurred over time, but the hurt had stayed sharp. Yet here she was, smiling like nothing had ever happened. "I can't believe it's you," she said, stepping closer. "We have so much to catch up on." I hesitated, but my mouth formed the words anyway. "Do you want to grab a coffee?" That was all it took. For the first hour, it was almost pleasant. We talked about jobs, places we'd lived, people we used to know. Claire listened closely, too closely, tilting her head and blinking in that slow, deliberate way she had back in college. When I mentioned I lived nearby, she smiled faintly. I'd love to see it. I laughed, a little uneasy. It's just an apartment. That's fine, she said. I just want to be in your space again. The phrasing stuck with me, but I brushed it off. By the end of the afternoon, she'd convinced me to let her walk me home. She wandered through my living room as soon as we stepped inside, running her fingertips along the bookshelf, the mantel, the edges of picture frames. She didn't comment on the photos, but her eyes lingered on each one for a beat too long. When she finally left, she hugged me tightly, holding on until I had to step back. Claire started appearing more often. Sometimes she'd text first, short messages like, "You home?" or "I'm nearby." But other times she wouldn't. I'd find her waiting in the lobby or leaning against the building's brick wall, smiling as if she belonged there. The first time she let herself into my apartment without asking, I told myself I must have forgotten to lock the door. She was sitting on my couch when I came out of the shower, her coat draped neatly over the armrest. "You should be more careful," she said lightly. "Anyone could walk in." Her eyes traveled slowly over me. Damp hair, bare feet, and she smiled. After that, I started locking the door every time, yet somehow she was still there the next week. It began small. My favorite coffee mug, the chipped blue one from my grandmother, went missing. I found it 2 days later, washed and tucked into the wrong cupboard. A sweater I wore often vanished, only to reappear weeks later smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't own. Then there were the sounds. A faint knock on the wall at night, soft humming from the hallway when I was certain I was alone. One morning I woke up to find my living room rearranged, couch at a new angle, books restacked, throw pillows swapped. Claire stopped by that afternoon, and when I mentioned it, she smiled in that infuriatingly calm way. "I just thought it would feel more like home for you." I started pulling back, ignoring her texts, declining invitations, but she never seemed to take the hint. One evening, after a long day at work, I found her sitting on my bed, leafing through my old journals. My throat tightened. "You can't just come in here," I said. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "I just want to know you again. The real you, the way we used to." "That's not your decision," I snapped. Her eyes softened, but her voice was steady. "I think you've forgotten, Lena. You were happiest when you were with me. I can help you remember." Something in her tone, not pleading, not threatening, just certain, made my stomach twist. It was past midnight when I woke to the sound of breathing, not my own. I froze, heart pounding, listening. The faint exhale-inhale was coming from the corner of the room. My phone was on the nightstand. I reached for it, fingers brushing the screen, and the breathing stopped. A whisper floated through the dark. "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I switched on the lamp. Claire was standing there, her hair loose around her face, eyes shining in the light. My voice cracked. "Get out." She didn't move. Why would I leave? This is where I belong. We belong here together. The next morning I called the building manager and had the locks changed. I told him, and myself, that it was over. But when I came home from work, my door was unlocked. On the kitchen counter was my chipped blue mug, filled with fresh coffee. Steam curled lazily upward. Pinned beneath it was a note in her looping handwriting. "You'll get used to me being here again." Evan Morrow had a bad habit of staying up until the sky started to pale. His apartment, 4 stories above the quiet stretch of Halberd Street, was dim, cluttered, and filled with camera equipment from shoots he never finished editing. Most nights, he'd sink into the couch with a cold coffee and scroll endlessly through short videos. Memes, travel clips, bizarre DIY hacks. Half the content bled together until it was a blur. But that night, as the clock on his laptop read 1:42 a.m., a new notification blinked across his screen. A video has been recommended for you. The thumbnail was strange. A dimly lit room, walls the color of old newspaper, and a single wooden chair placed dead center. The lighting was uneven, yellowish, like a forgotten basement. Curious, Evan clicked. The clip was 10 seconds long. No sound, just the chair in the center. Empty. That was it. When it ended, he frowned, expecting an account name or a caption. There was nothing, only a looping replay and the soft sound of his computer fan. Something about it made him watch again. 2 nights later, the same account posted another video. This time, someone sat in the chair. A pale man in a black shirt, his posture stiff. The light hung directly above him, leaving his face partially in shadow. Evan leaned forward. The man didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there. There was still no caption, no hashtags, no username. When Evan refreshed the feed, the video was gone. A week passed. Work piled up. Evan forgot about the clips until another one appeared at 3:17 a.m. The same man, the same room. But now he was leaning forward slightly, and Evan could just make out a thin scar running from the corner of his mouth to his jaw. The man's lips moved, but there was no sound. Evan replayed the video 6 times, trying to lip read. The movement was deliberate, slow. Finally, on the 7th loop, Evan was almost sure the man had mouthed, "I see you." A chill ran up his spine. 2 nights later, Evan was working late on photo edits when the next video auto-played. The man in the chair was closer now. This time, there was sound. A faint static hum, like a detuned radio. Then, in a flat voice, the man said, "Blue hoodie, gray sweatpants," sitting on the couch. Evan froze. That was exactly what he was wearing. Evan stopped sleeping well. Every creak of the apartment made him check the locks twice. He considered deleting the app, but curiosity hooked deeper than fear. One night he checked the account again. The video was different. The chair was still there, but the background had changed. Instead of the dingy, yellow-walled room, he could see shelves stacked with old, dusty camera lenses. It looked eerily like his storage closet. He hit pause, studied every detail, the warped wood paneling, the small dent on the back wall. It was his storage closet. At 4:09 a.m., Evan was woken by the ding of a new notification. The latest video loaded automatically. The man was gone. The camera now faced a narrow hallway, lit only by a dim bulb. At the far end of the hall was Evan's apartment door, recognizable by the chipped white paint and the brass number 42. His throat tightened. The camera began to move, gliding forward with unnatural smoothness. Closer, closer. The static grew louder. The video cut to black just as the camera reached the door. Evan backed away from his desk. He pulled out his phone, ready to call someone, anyone. But before he could, the app sent another notification. Live now, 1 viewer. He clicked without thinking. The stream was dark for a moment, just muffled shuffling sounds. Then, the view tilted upward. The camera was inside his apartment. The man from the chair stood in his living room, head slightly tilted, staring directly into the lens. "Evan," he said softly, "stop watching." Evan bolted for the front door, yanking it open, only to find the hallway from the videos. The same yellow walls, the same single chair, now sitting 6 feet away. The man was in it. Evan staggered back, but his apartment was gone. Behind him stretched the same endless hallway. The camera in the corner clicked on. Somewhere in the darkness, the man's voice whispered, "Your turn."